Welcome to Food, Wine, and Whiskey, a podcast about having fun conversations on tasty dishes, vinos, and spirits from around the world. Rob is your host. He is an avid home chef, WSET Level 2 award in wine, and a whiskey drinker and collector. Time to set the table. Here's Rob.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Food, Wine, and Whiskey. Going to be a learning show today. We're going to clear up some of the confusion that I've had, and I think a lot of people have had, when we start hearing these new terms in wine that put them in a certain category. So we have a special guest today from VinSanto, one of the Somms here. Aaron, how you doing, buddy?
Doing good. How are you today, Rob?
I'm good, man. It's going to be a fun conversation. You're the expert. I got all the questions. You have all the answers, right?
I will do my very best for you.
I'm just kidding. But this is something that's been on my mind for a while, because you start to see this, the casual wine drinker sees the marketing, the advertising, somebody in a store or shop mentioning to them, this wine is natural, this wine is organic, this wine is biodynamic, and we're going, as a consumer, what does it mean to me, and what should it mean to me? So that's kind of the conversation we'll dive into today. My focus, I want to be, Aaron, if you're okay with it, is kind of on that biodynamic, because that's really what I think is very, very cool, what they're doing, and interesting, and I can see how this process could really improve, what we get in the bottle, because it's kind of what Mother Nature wanted that land and that area to be, if I'm kind of generalizing there.
That's a big part of it. It's biodynamic is deeply rooted in the biodiversity of the farm, the vineyard, because it's essentially a farming practice. So it's been applied to vineyards. But it has to do with treating the ecosystem that you're growing in as an organism itself. The plants, the animals that would naturally be there are essentially performing a necessary function. So it's organic in the sense that you're not using synthetic fertilizers and things. You're composting. But you're also allowing for nature to do its job.
Yeah.
So if you allow certain animals into your vineyard, or you that would be predators for other things that might be pests, then you're kind of it's a win-win situation.
yeah, absolutely. Before we dive down that kind of rabbit hole,
sure,
and get into that conversation, let's get the other two. So that's biodynamic. Let's talk quickly, just a quick definition of what organic wine would be, and then also natural wine.
Sure.
And I'll be honest and tell you, I have a bit of a, I don't know if it's a marketing ploy or if it's just what it really is, the natural wine. So I'm open-minded. I can be convinced to dive into it more, but right now I've had more misses than hits when I've tried these.
Yeah.
So, when you kind of have that happen a few times, you go, maybe not for me. But
sure,
maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I've just not been trying the right things. But first, let's go over kind of these definitions, but also include in there, you have this chart of what is this? Is this what we should... in the wine world, the actual producers and farmers, this is what they kind of, the areas of what wines or grapes can be defined as? Is that what this is?
Well, I'd say a big part of it is how these things are verified. So with biodynamic wine, there is an organization called Demeter, or Demeter, sorry. Demeter, that is... Demeter International and Demeter USA was established in the 1920s, and they are an actual organization that regulates and certifies biodynamic farms and vineyards and wine. Whereas organic, there's a few different organizations. It can change country to country.
That was going to be my question. So it's really, the rules aren't standard in the industry of wine. It can be based, just like there's different rules for what a wine can be called, or the percentage of grapes to be called something or something like that. Same thing with these certifications.
Yeah, I mean, so Demeter is a international organization that is not specific to wine. But for organic wine, there's a few different organizations that might be, regional or by country, and some of those rules might change by country. And then natural wine is
the fun one.
Is unregulated.
Yeah.
There is no organization that says this is a natural wine, this is not. It's just kind of more a general idea that you are of minimal intervention in all stages. So that can mean that it's, you can have crossover with organic and biodynamic wine being natural.
And a lot of times you do.
Yeah.
Or maybe not natural, but organic probably more.
Yeah. It just depends. One of the big things to be natural is you're using native yeast, not inoculated yeast.
Is that 100% true, or is that most of the time? Because I read somewhere that you can put in your own yeast in certain places, but again, it gets back to there is no real regulation.
Yeah, you can possibly use commercial yeast. I'd say that in general, to what we think of as natural wine is what's going to be using native yeast.
Okay. And sometimes no yeast at all, right?
You're going to have yeast to...
Just what's in the air, what's in the...
It'll be on the skin of the grape itself.
Or on the skin of the grape, yeah.
Okay. So it's the native yeast that is
okay.
Going
When you say
ferment.
native yeast, that's what you're talking about, not a cultured yeast that they've made from.
They're not no inoculation of some, so no additive. So organic wine would be have no GMO yeast. No, so you could use a non-GMO yeast that is not necessarily native, but It does restrict which kinds of yeast you can inoculate it with. When we talk about natural wines, and I don't want to stay on these too long, but I just want the listeners to kind of have some understanding here. What's the thought behind them? What's the, because when we think about wine, I'm thinking, one, the star is the vines and the fruit that you get. That's the star. And the job of the winemaker is not to screw that up, right? Is to take really good fruit and make sure he makes really good wine or she makes really good wine and puts it in that bottle. Natural wine, we talked about, it's really might be more accurately called low intervention wine, minimal intervention wine. They still have to do something. Wine's not natural. It's grapes. They ferment but to make it wine, you have to do something. But the goal there is to just have it be an expression of itself, that this is what it is without me blending. Or do they blend in natural wine? Yeah, of course. Blending can take place at multiple stages.
Okay.
You can blend this, using the same grape. You can have different press factions. You can have different harvest dates.
Oh, okay.
So blending is something that is not just two grapes being mixed together. Which you can do, and again, they can be co-fermented, where they're blended and then fermented, so blended as juice, or you can go all the way finish them, age them separately, something in concrete or steel, and then something else in oak, and then blend that together.
Okay.
So the blending can mean a lot of different things. I'd say, getting back to the natural wine again, it's that minimal intervention, which might mean it's a very old school, very traditional, style of making wine, fining and filtration. So they, back to the days of when the wine came out, you bottled it, or you were done with it, and that was that. You didn't clean it up and make it look pretty.
Yeah, you didn't filter it or do anything like that. Yeah.
The other big thing is, and again, because there's no regulation, there's no true restriction on this, but generally natural wines are known to have no added sulfites. And what that can be confusing for a lot of people. There was this big hype for a long time. Sulfites give me headaches, this and that.
Not true, right?
No. If you've ever had a raisin, you've probably had 1,000 times more sulfites in one sitting than you ever did with a glass of wine.
Or orange juice or any,
Yeah, and also, just because a wine does not have any added yeast, any added sulfites, does not mean that it's sulfite free, because sulfites are a natural byproduct of fermentation. So it's impossible to have a completely sulfite free wine.
And if people really dove into it a little bit, they'd be surprised at how many food and drinks that we consume have sulfites, because it is a natural thing that happens in a lot of food. It's a natural
preservative.
preservative. Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, anything that you've had preserved probably had some sulfites.
So with natural wine, a lot of times, one of my question is, again, when I think about quality wines from places around the globe, I think I always want to have a sense of place, where this comes from, a style. You see a lot of people who blind wine, who are master somms or masters of wine or whatever. They can usually maybe not get the exact place it's from, but they can narrow it down pretty good based on the style of wine. There's this sense of place that it could be from or probably is from. Do you still get that with natural wines?
I mean, in a lot of senses, it might give you a better sense of that concept we call terroir. So a lot of winemakers kind of toe that line of how much intervention and manipulation you want to actually do to the wine. Are you going to start to get rid of some of those natural flavors after a time? And that's actually why these wines that we're going to be tasting today are from very traditional, classic wine producers that are converting to biodynamic growing practices and winemaking practices because it gives a better sense of that terroir, the true terroir that you get from the biodiversity.
So all these wines are biodynamic.
Yes.
Are they all natural as well?
I don't believe they would.
Okay. The reason I ask is, I'm showing my skepticism on natural wines, and I've jumped ahead, Aaron, because I've already tasted this first one you've poured for us. Tell us what we have in the glass, but I like it.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
This is a Cremant d'Alsace from a producer called Huber Meyer.
Wow.
So it is champagne style. It is going to be using a grape called Pinot Blanc. Alsace is going to be on the border with Germany in France. And it's, you're going to have, if you've ever had like a Blanc de Blanc champagne where it's very crisp and refreshing and you have those subtle kind of yeast notes, like maybe a little sourdough to it, a little bread crust.
Yeah.
But here, the part of the fun is that Pinot Blanc grape is giving you a little more stone fruit, a little more like white flowers, a little jasmine.
But you still get that hint of the bread. A little bit of that brioche in there for sure.
Yeah, it's on the nose and a little bit in the finish, but that body is a little richer and a little more expressive. You have some really fun fruit flavors.
So on a wine like this, when we think about champagne, you mentioned this is in the same method that champagne is made, so second fermentation in the bottle. Means it spends this time on the lees. I'm guessing this is probably 9 months to 16 months, something like that. Probably not a long, long time like you might see, but bang for your buck wine. What does this run retail here at VinSanto?
This wine is going to be not quite hit the shelf yet, so I believe it's going to be like a $36 bottle.
Oh, you can't beat that.
It's not hit the shelf yet because it was part of my wine club subscription here in April. So the theme being biodynamic wine, I was kind of inspired by the solar eclipse we had April 8th.
Yeah.
And I was something I, like you, was interested in knowing more and really got to dive in and research these wines and pick out some really fun ones for my club.
You had to make sure these stayed available for the club members before you put them out for everybody else.
Yes, so really I don't release wines until the next month is out. So
Makes
you get
sense.
that a little exclusivity of being a member.
That's very cool. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, well, great start. I mean, this is really delicious, and I'll say Cremants
great
from
classic,
Alsace are typically bangers. I mean, they usually hit for me, for sure.
Yeah, and this is actually a producer I've loved for a really long time. They make a fantastic Cremant d'Alsace Rosé as well, 100% Pinot Noir. That's super elegant, nice kind of rose petal notes to it, subtle red fruit. Not like a really dark color to it. It's a lighter, crisper style.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so that's natural wines, and like I said at the beginning, I'm open to continue to try to explore this style of wine. Yeah. Like I said, I've just had more that I've kind of missed with than I've hit with, and I do the same thing in regions. If I go to a wine region and I don't find wines I like, I kind of move on, right? Because it's not my profile.
Well, so I'd say there is going to be like a spectrum. The wines that are called natural and can be a little funkier and a little less approachable, they tend to also have wine faults.
Okay.
So there are
Are they acceptable with a natural wine? Is that what we're saying?
I
mean, they're putting it in the bottle.
I've had some very
so.
natural wines that I don't know that I would want to distribute myself.
Yeah.
If you're tasting just like a lot of volatile acid, if it's almost kind of vinegary, if it's like a little too. If all I'm tasting is like yeast, if it tastes like brewer's yeast or something, to me that's not a mark of a quality wine. But there are natural wines that are without faults, and they're really quality wines. It just they chose not to do these extra steps or other manipulations.
Yeah. So would you say that this is a very young category, and right now it's understandable to be getting less hits that you like than ones that you don't, and let's just continue to let them do what they're doing, and we're going to see over time that they're going to perfect and kind of understand more and be producing better wines here in the near future?
I'd say, if we're being very technically speaking, natural wine is the oldest style of wine. But I mean, technology is there for a reason, and it has made winemaking better. But that's not to say that there aren't fantastic wines out there that would qualify as being natural.
Yeah.
It's all case by case basis with any wine.
Sure, and technology is still going to play a part. How much are we going to help with how much sunlight it gets or water and all the things that you can do to kind of help the grapes along during that growing season before harvest to make sure that you get in the bottle what you want. Mm-hmm. Things that they may not have done, 100 years ago or 200 years ago.
I mean, the not necessarily using wine making techniques that are going to change the wine, but vineyard management for sure. Just the knowledge that has come with time for
absolutely.
Sure, definitely.
Instead of just going out and tasting and going, it's sweet, let's pull them and make wine. It's got enough sugar in it. Yeah, so it'd be interesting. All right, organic wine. We won't spend a lot of time on this. Natural one was one I had some questions about, obviously, as you heard. Organic wine, to me, is really just like it sounds, organic. There's nothing really man-made, chemicals, things like this, pesticides going on the vines to reduce critters and things like that and disease from getting into the vines. Is that kind of, to simplify it, is that simple terms?
Yeah, no synthetic pesticides allowed, no synthetic, so you have to use synthetic pesticide-free soils. I believe fertilization, you have to really be controlled if you are using a third-party certification. There is an actual controlled amount of sulfites that can be used, but sulfites are allowed.
Yeah, and sulfites and copper are the two things that are used, when you have to keep water off or keep water on, right? Or something like that.
I believe this is going to be like when we're in the winery itself.
Oh, the winery, okay.
So the SO2 is used to cap off the wine before the cork goes in.
Okay, yep.
There's a little bit that goes in, and it's minute because it has to be very highly regulated, because if there's too much, it's poisonous.
Sure.
But it's there to give you stability in the wine, so you don't have a lot of bottle variation, which is the big problem with some of those natural wines, is if they're not adding sulfites, then you open one bottle and it might be totally different than another.
That's a great point. I remember reading about that you can get in natural wines bottle variation, not vintage, but bottle.
Big time.
Yeah, that's a great point. So organic wines, not something to overthink. If it's organic, that's a good thing. Yeah, we really don't have an issue with that. I mean, we all care about Mother Earth, and we want it to be maintained and taken care of. So I'm good with organic wines.
It seems like a no-brainer, and a lot of the times, it seems like if you're going towards that step, you might as well go towards being fully biodynamic, which if you're not using pesticides, then you need some kind of solution, and that's what biodynamic practices offer. There's not only that biodiversity, which works in your favor with not only pests but microbes. It prevents fungal diseases if you have natural, defenses against it. But there's also natural treatments that are used in the vineyard, which those are where some of the interesting stories about biodynamic wines come from. Is some of these treatments, which can be really, benign, from using things like chamomile, oak bark in your composting, to the little more eccentric, where cow manure is
Absolutely.
buried in a cow's horn, which
Wait, what's the cow? I mean, cow manure, I get it, great fertilizer, but cow horn? What?
in the horn itself, it's then buried in the vineyard, generally
It's
in the winter.
A strategic way or something.
It has to do with the horn silica can be a immunity booster for the plants.
So that's what I'm saying. They're burying these horns in a certain spot along the vines, so that they get that whatever they're getting from it into the vine.
Yeah, I mean,
is that what it is, or is it just
it's buried within the farm or the vineyard itself? I don't know how many treatments are used at once specifically.
That's interesting.
But yeah, all these treatments have a purpose. It's not just like hippie mumbo jumbo. They have actual purposes. There's treatment that's called horsetail tea, which is antifungal, but totally natural.
Yeah, and just getting back to biodynamic wine, you mentioned it kind of as we started the conversation, and you mentioned something about natural wines. That's the way it was made 100 years ago, and biodynamic farming sounds really technological. Biodynamic sounds like it's really advanced. It's really a old school way of doing things, because if we think about the way farmers in France or Italy or any kind of wine consuming country 100, 200, 300 years ago, they had vines. They made wine. It was more for just their consumption on their table. They weren't distributing wine, but they also were farmers. They had, livestock. They had other crops. They had all kinds of, whether it was orchard trees and things like this going on their property. And to your point, it's all of these things harmoniously working together, pollinating and fertilizing and helping each other kind of be the best that they can be.
You had a family farm. Chances are you weren't just growing the plants. You probably had animals that you were raising there as well, which is a big part of biodynamic farming. I'd say the part of biodynamic farming that goes very far back would be this holistic idea of not just biodiversity in the farm or vineyard itself, but paying attention to the lunar cycles, the different cosmic forces, bodies in the universe, and how that affects, we know the moon affects our tides, so why would it not play a part in, plants?
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, and some people might be going, well, that's kind of weird, but let me throw something out to you where I think people go, okay, no, that makes sense. The Farmer's Almanac.
Yeah.
Been around for a very long time, and farmers, it's kind of their Bible of what to expect season to season based on to what you just said, these lunar cycles and different things of what we're going to get. And, a lot of people hear what you just said and think it's kind of weird, but when you think about the Farmer's Almanac, something been around a very long time, and it's depended on to get a good idea of how we should farm this year based on what we're expecting as far as weather. Not climate. Climate is, what you typically get. Weather is what we're expecting this year, Here in Houston, we might be going, this year we're expecting a hurricane. I hope not, Aaron. But, those kind of things, everything lines up a certain way, and it's very cool that they can do that and then apply it to what they're doing in the vineyards.
Oh, yeah. People have been looking up to the stars and tracking them for a very long time and using that knowledge. So modern biodynamic principles and practices were actually established in 1924 by an Austrian...
That long ago?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's been around for a while, but the defined principles that it follows are really not that old, 100 years old, not.
Yeah.
But it was a Austrian architect by the name of Rudolf Steiner who did a series of lectures to a group of farmers trying to promote these ideas.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So when I think about biodynamic farming and I think about winemakers, my first thought is, one, as a wine nerd, I enjoy finding bottles of wine from small farmers, that are making things that may not be as distributed as some of these bigger brands. And that's what's fun to me, is finding something unique and different. And I'm thinking that's the person who's probably going to be more inclined to do biodynamic farming, because a huge, we talk about Constellation or somebody like that who owns millions of hectares of vine or acres of vines. To do biodynamic farming, is that feasible? Is there something that people are seeing in the future that go, this isn't just for the small farmer?
I'd say one of the biggest hurdles I could see for a large-scale operation where they are committed to high-volume production is that one of the requirements to be certified by Demeter as a biodynamic vineyard is that 10% of the farm must be dedicated strictly to biodiversity, which means 10% of the land is not farmed.
Okay.
So I could see that being a pretty big hurdle to a operation that is trying to just get as much planted and farmed and produced as quickly as possible.
And one thing that I read that I thought was very cool and a little surprising but very interesting to me was Kendall Jackson. And if folks don't know, obviously they think about them here in the States as they have some really nice wines, but they're more that mid-level to lower-level kind of wine producer here in the States. But they own, when I think about Australia, they own some beautiful high-end vineyards over there that produce some really high quality wines, and they own a lot globally. But they're a producer that has gotten behind biodiversity and trying to do things. And I know one of the articles I read was, they tried to, when they have to put this natural fertilizer on, it's this like powder. And they said when you have to put it on, you have to kind of drive the tractor slow so that it doesn't go so fast that it creates this wind that it blows off the vine and doesn't stay where it's supposed to. And they found in doing some testing and research that when they did that and they drove the tractor slow, the diesel fumes were actually more harmful to the plant than, what would be a manufactured pesticide to put on.
Oh, yeah.
So now they're going, okay, we've got to figure out a way to do this with electric tractors. And I went, well, good for them. I mean, it's not going to be something that happens overnight, but for them to have that vision of the planet and really as a big producer, trying to figure out ways to do their part, not just looking at, the bottom line and making a buck, I really respected that about them.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I mean, that would probably be a big hurdle, as we were talking about, to doing a more responsible production otherwise.
Yeah.
I mean, the alternative for a lot of other, vineyards is the good old horse and buggy.
Yeah, that's a good point. You poured something else in our glass. What do we have here? Talk to us about this next wine we got.
So this next one is the Domaine du Seigneur. It's a Côte-du-Rhône producer that has a lot of vineyards in Châteauneuf-du-Pape, but this is their Antares, named for the star in the Scorpio system. And it is from Lirac, which is right across the Rhône River from Châteauneuf-du-Pape.
Man, beautiful nose.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, beautiful nose.
It's no Syrah. It's all Grenache and Mourvèdre. So you have this really elegant dark fruit, dark flowers like lavender and violets, a little white pepper at the back, but a little more full-bodied, but still very elegant, and could drink this by itself or with food. It would be
it has good acidity.
Oh yeah.
So when you say food, this would be a great food wine.
Definitely.
Yeah, this is also biodynamic, which is nice. Mm-hmm. Do you see, is there, are people in the wine world talking about when farmers are applying biodynamics to making their wine? Are they seeing a difference in the quality? Are they seeing a difference in anything in the wine where it's noticeable?
Yeah, this producer specifically, they converted to producing biodynamic grapes because not only is it giving you that better sense of the true terroir, the environment that you're growing in, because it generally gives you lower yields because, you will lose some grapes to animals and things that are around. If you're not using it, these chemical fertilizers and pesticides, then you're not artificially boosting those yields. But in wine, we know that a lower yield can actually give you
better wine.
Better wine.
Yeah. I mean, that's really what we want as us wine geeks, right? That lower yield. I always say if you think about an apple tree, two of them, one produces 100 apples, the other one produces 10. And I'll ask people, which one do you want? And they go, well, I want one from the 100. And if you think about it, all of the resources of that tree to make 100 apples, they're going to be more, call it diluted, than the one that made 10. It's going to have more bigger, better flavor because more of what it was using to produce that went into those apples. Same thing with grapes.
Yeah, or I would think of it even like, if I have 10 things to do on my to-do list or 50 things to do on my to-do list, how good am I going to get those tasks done,
Absolutely, because when we talk about yields, that's something when we talk about vineyard management, a lot of vineyard managers will do that. They will manage the yield because they know that. And what are ways that they would do that? I mean, are they pruning and cutting some off? Are they limiting water? Are they, you want to create some stress and things like this?
Yeah, you can do what's called a green harvest when you would drop grapes off that are maybe, I believe it's generally done before veraison, the color change, and that is to change the amount of water. So basically, you're dropping grapes that would be otherwise diluted and not produce a very expressive raw product to work with. Controlling yields in a lot of ways, you are controlling that with the vineyard management itself. So like might be like your planting density and where it is. So if you're planting in soil that's clay holds a lot more water than gravel. Gravel is going to allow for that drainage. So that might give you a influence on if it's very moist soil, you're going to plant closer together. You're going to plant more densely, and that will cause some competition in the vines as well. That could lower your yields, and it won't lead to a diluted grape.
Yeah, because water level matters. How much water a vine gets, they manage. That's one of the things they manage in the vineyard to make sure they get quality in the grapes.
And you want more at the start of the summer, and then you want to
stressing them out a little bit.
And then you want to stress them out.
Yeah,
definitely,
exactly. So when we think about, if you go to, let's just say Napa or somewhere where it's supposed to be this really pretty, when you go look at these vineyards, they're all very well manicured, and you don't see any weeds around the vines. They've just been cleaned up so well. And biodynamic, when you go to a farm and you see this, we want you to know that when you see other vegetation, weeds or whatever, there's a purpose that they're around that vine. They're serving a purpose in helping that vine produce the best grapes that they can.
Yeah, they're going to help contribute and monitor that exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide, and they're going to...
Do they help with pests?
They can help with pests. They can be food for the animals that would otherwise be eating on the grapes. They can contribute different nutrients that the vine might be taking from the ground. It serves a multitude of purposes. It's called cover cropping. So where you're adding cover crops essentially. things that
it
would,
looks all shaggy. It looks like, wait,
Yeah.
you're not taking care of your vineyard, but you actually are. It's meant to be that way.
Yeah, no, that is the reason, the purpose is that biodiversity is it is your safety net. Yeah.
Yeah. And when we think about animals, same way. One, they can keep predators away that might want to come in and eat on the grapes, or maybe not even predators, but deer or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But they also, I mean, let's just say there's some fertilization there, but they're also probably eating on some of this vegetation that helps kind of manage and keep that, where we don't have to spray something to keep stuff from growing. We just allow the animals to eat it in a natural way.
Yeah, it's the natural cycle that the plant might encourage certain microbes, and then those microbes might have antifungal properties. The rabbit might eat the plant. It keeps it from getting overgrown. You might have, say you have a fox and it's eating the rats, that the rats would be going after the the grapes itself.
Yeah.
So it's it's all kind of just, it's working in harmony. That it's that holistic approach.
It's an ecosystem for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So some people would let me ask it that way. Is this hippie farming? Is this kind of hipster farming? Or is this,
I think it gets that moniker mainly due to the use and the following of the lunar cycle, the which does incorporate like your astrological signs. There is a biodynamic calendar where you have different days. You have flower days, you have fruit days, leaf days, and root days. And those are based on the lunar cycle, but also your different star signs. So it's kind of incorporating astrology in a way. It's the astrology of farming. But so that's where I think the hippie kind of moniker comes from. But really, it's, as we talked about, it's having to do with those cycles that really do affect us here on Earth.
not only that, I think it's the producers going, I don't want to put chemicals and stuff it's crap that eventually could go into the bodies of the people consuming my wine. So I want a more organic, a truer product going into the bottle. And I want that to be what I produce and I'm known for, is that I care about people and what they're consuming.
Yeah. And as you said, it doesn't look like a Napa vineyard, right?
Yeah.
It's not sterilized. So that kind of wild aspect to it, I could see also being like, well, that's kind of, not neat and pretty like we like it to be. But
Some of it could be marketing. They say different ways to kind of catch certain people, I guess. It could be part of it as well, which, hey, it's fine.
I'd say, people are definitely capitalizing on the hype around natural wine. And then, as you said, we started seeing all these different terms, organic, biodynamic. Without really understanding what they meant, we kind of lumped them all together.
Yeah, that's kind of where I wanted to do this episode, because I think a lot of people just go, it's the same thing, you just call it something different, and they're really completely different things.
Oh, yeah, very, very, very different. That's what was really interesting for me getting to delve into these wines. And I had, I've had like Chiantis that are biodynamic, and I was like really surprised. It was not something I expected to, when I was, going to be tasting a biodynamic wine. I did not expect it to be a Chianti, really traditional, old producer. But so that's kind of sparked the interest for me. It was like, they can be very traditional, very, familiar wines.
So here's a hurdle. I'm wondering your thoughts on how a consumer would get over this hurdle. Because when I think about the small farmer, there's a cost to being certified. And they just don't come out and look at you and go, you're doing it the right way. You have to, there's a fee associated with being deemed certified. Then you have to maintain and get rechecked, probably annually. I don't know. Each country could be a little bit different. So there's a lot of little producers, little farmers who are actually doing things the right way, whether it's organically or biodynamically, but they're not getting that certification because the cost associated with it, they just can't afford it. How does the consumer other than it being on the bottle? Is it just kind of getting to know the producers of these wines so you can understand what they're doing, how they're doing it?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that in a lot of cases, if they're going that extra step, they're going to want you to know about it. Whether that means eventually getting that certification.
Because you can't put it on the label unless you have the certification, correct?
I mean,
you can't call yourself organic if you haven't gotten certified organic.
I think.
Or is there some loopholes there?
I mean, you can say like, I mean, you can say like it's made with organic grapes, and then that doesn't. I don't know if that necessarily means that you have a certification from a third party group.
Okay.
With there are certain groups, and they have their own logo, and if you put their logo on your label and weren't certified, I'm sure that would not go over well.
Yeah.
But the same with Demeter. It's they have their own logos and certifications that will go on there. You can't just say I'm biodynamically certified. You might be able to say like we use biodynamic practices, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
Which I feel like definitely in the world of organic wines, and you can see wines that are organic, grown with made with organic grapes that maybe don't have a certification.
So another question that I have, and I'm assuming a lot of the listeners might have, it might be like, hey, I definitely want to support this. It sounds like a great thing that they're doing. It's better for me as a consumer of wine. But what's the cost? I mean, it sounds like it's a lot of work. You got animals, you got vegetation, you're doing all these natural things. It's got to be some more cost to it. Am I paying more per bottle of wine for a biodynamic, a natural, or an organic than I would for other producers' wines? Or are we not seeing that? It's pretty competitive.
No, I mean, if you're paying for a certain quality of wine where that these wines would fall in I mean...
So there's no added cost for,
No,
the wine speaks for itself. The level of quality is going to drive what should be paid for that wine. It's still the same. It's not like this is the quality, so you get this is the price, and we're adding $10 for being biodynamic.
No, I have not seen that at all.
That's good news.
These wines are, for the quality that they're at, they are on par with other wines of the same quality that don't have that certification.
For the same price.
Same price.
So,
I'd say like this Côte d'Aron, like the rock that we're drinking, could easily be a more expensive wine than it is.
So I don't know the price of this, but if I'm getting a Côte d'Aron from this region, I'm thinking $35 to $45 is what I would pay for something like this. What is this priced at?
This is in that $42.
Okay, so we're right in that range. Okay,
yeah,
that's good news.
Yeah.
So what else do you have for the listeners? Should they go out and search this out, or is there a reason to look for these wines? As a consumer, is it a way to support and help these things continue to grow? Because obviously the world of retail is give the consumer what they want, right? So if the consumer is asking for biodiversity wines, then we got to give it to them. And so should the consumer be looking for these?
I'd say if you're somebody that enjoys going to a wine bar, and you're having someone serve you, then yeah, it's definitely something that I think it's worth asking about. When you're shopping, if you're unassisted, some of these wines, they may not tell you, if that they're biodynamic right on the label.
I don't see it on this one.
On this one, it doesn't have a logo or anything on it that is telling you that it's that it is biodynamic. It looks like just a very traditional Rhone. It's got an embossed bottle and very classic looking label.
Yeah.
And it would pass right on by with all the other Côte d'Aron's, but it is indeed biodynamic, grown, and I believe the wine itself is produced biodynamic.
And I guess the reason I'm asking that question is I'm trying to get an understanding is, are the producers, the winemakers who are doing biodynamic, are they trying to, and I'm guessing they are because they know it's better for everybody involved, the planet and everybody, to get more producers to, kind of get on board with this. So I'm assuming they want people to find and seek out their wines because they are biodynamic. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're just going, we're doing this so that we know we're producing the best things. Hopefully, you didn't enjoy the wine. If you don't know it's biodynamic, that's fine. We know you consuming our wine, you're getting a great thing in your body.
Yeah, I'd say one of the inherent principles of biodynamic farming is to not only, encourage and support the ecosystem that you're working with, but the earth itself as an ecosystem. Yeah. You are, by using these practices, working towards a more sustained future by not destroying the planet that we're using right now. So I'd say that, yes, as a philosophy, as a practice, it's meant to be spread and shared, and a lot of these same ideas have gone to the establishment of a lot of like community gardens and things like that of that nature.
Yeah.
So it goes much beyond the world of wine when we're talking about what is biodynamic in practice. In terms of the winemakers, a lot of what I've read is that they are really looking for that better expression of the grape, of the land itself. And I can't imagine that, with especially tasting these wines that we had today, that any vineyard owner would not want to get on the boat.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I put it into the world that we live in today. We want to know where everything comes from and what's in it. When we talk about the world of food, I want grass-fed beef, right? You don't want something eating, whatever, processed stuff. You want your chickens to be, free range or, whatever, not caged up. You want, if you're looking at a bag of chips, you want to make sure it doesn't have certain fats and other things in it that are bad for you. So we're very conscious. We're very aware of these things when we talk about food and stuff. And to me, something that we enjoy and pay a premium for, we should think of the same way. I mean, it just kind of makes sense. If we're going to do it in other areas of our life, why not with our wine as well?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's seems like
a no-brainer, right?
A no-brainer. Yeah. It seems like where I would like to see the future of wine head into, because I was really pleased with the selections that I had for these wines. They for what I was expecting, these really kind of went above and beyond for me. So I was really happy to have these wines, both very traditional French wines, but incredibly expressive. So
beautiful wines.
Yeah, beautiful wines, and that speaks for itself.
Absolutely. Well, Aaron, thanks so much for coming on today. This has been, some questions I've had, some clarifications I've wanted. I've enjoyed the conversation of getting a better understanding of, natural, organic, and biodynamic wines. Not the same thing being said three different ways. They are clearly different things in the wine world, and understanding them as a consumer helps me in making, purchases that I want to. So I appreciate you coming on and doing this.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Anytime.
So you're saying you'll come back on?
Definitely.
All right. And we'll have to find another fun topic and have you back on.
My pleasure, definitely.
Thanks, everybody, for listening to this episode of Food, Wine, and Whiskey. And until our next episode, enjoy your next pour.